So this week we're going to talk about the annotated bibliography. And the annotated bibliography is really your big project for the semester. Um, yeah, there's that 8 to 12 page paper, and you're probably thinking that looks scarier. But the annotated bibliography is the foundation of that paper. And so if you get this bibliography solid, then that paper actually becomes really easy. But if this bibliography isn't in place, then the paper becomes pretty difficult. So you'll have to do some like catch-up work if the bibliography isn't working. So a bibliography, whether annotated or not, a bibliography is a list of resources for a given project. And sometimes this is a further reading list, and sometimes this is a list of prospective sources for a project, sort of all the things you might use for the project. This is different than a works cited or works referenced list because those two options only list things that appeared in the project. A bibliography, however, can actually be independent of of a paper or other such project and can be a project of its own. It can actually be the end goal. Or a bibliography could accompany a larger project. It's very common to have bibliographies in proposals, as you're going to be doing, or it is common to use them as tools while you're working on a bigger project. So bibliographies are a bigger concept than works cited or references lists. An annotated bibliography is a bibliography with annotations. So it's a list of works and it has notes about each of those works. Annotation means that you put notes attached to something. So when, for instance, you write in your textbook, which if you have a physical textbook, I really hope you're doing, and if you have a digital one, I hope you're finding some way to organize your notes about it. Those things that you write in your book are called annotations. So an annotated bibliography is a bibliography with notes that are attached to it. So, as I said, they're used for a lot of different things. One thing that bibliographies are often used for is as a research tool for other researchers. So, a researcher might put together a bibliography in their own field as a entryway for other researchers trying to get into that field, where they're like, okay, these are the most fundamental texts in our field. This is what you need to read first. Another thing they might do it for is if there's interest in a specific subfield within the field. They might put together a bibliography for other researchers who want to contribute to that subfield, but maybe aren't sure that they have everything covered. So there's a lot of different reasons. I maintain, for instance, a bibliography for when my colleagues say, hey, I have a student who wants to do game studies. What are some good texts that I can give them to start with to get them started on their research? So I maintain a bibliography of some just very solid introductory texts for that, because I get that question so often that it benefits me just to have a document that I can hand them. So in this use, your audience is other researchers. Another use for the bibliography, whether annotated or not, is as a proposal, which is what you're doing in this project. So when used as a proposal, the bibliography is speculative in nature. That means it often is guessing what might be useful. And it displays the breadth and the depth of the research and helps define the scope by showing how the research that's being proposed fits into the bigger picture of existing research and uses existing research. What are the methods by which it's going to be responding? So the audience in the case of a proposal bibliography, a bibliography used as part of a proposal, would be whoever you are proposing to. So whatever gatekeepers are having to approve the project. So whether you're proposing something for publication, the publisher, whether you're proposing something for a grant, the people who grant, the organization, whether you're proposing a independent study or your master's thesis or your honors thesis or whatever it is, whatever that gatekeeper is, that's your audience. And then the final use of the bibliography is as a personal tool while you're doing research. So research can take a very long time, and it can involve a lot of different pieces in that project. And so you have to find some way to organize it and keep track of all that stuff. And a bibliography is possibly the best way to keep track of your research. Um, it's also true that many research projects are group projects of some kind, a team project. And in that case, having a bibliography keeps a unified ground level of this is what all of us know about the subject already. This is what we're building on. So, for instance, when I was a doctoral student, I worked for a year under a sociology professor who was doing a very large project on freshman retention. She had many students working under her because the data set was just so huge that there was no other way to do this project. So when I was brought onto the project, I was brought onto the project after the data had been collected and we were in the process of databasing it and making it useful. The first thing I had to do was go through the existing bibliography for the project to catch up, and then also to go through the annotated bibliography, because another thing we were doing was working on the literature review for the project, which a literature review is something we'll talk about when we talk about how to write the paper, but it's basically a discussion of what's been said already on the subject. So in this case, as a tool to help you organize your project, your audience will be either yourself if it's just your project, or your teammates as well if it's a group project. So in each case, your audience is going to shape what your bibliography looks like and how you choose to annotate your bibliography. So some of the features of a bibliography. All bibliographies have some kind of citation, but the style of that citation is going to be dependent on the situation. In your case, those citations will be in either MLA or APA format, and you may choose which one you think is more relevant to your interests. Bibliographies are generally presented as a list, bullet pointed, or maybe not bullet pointed, maybe numbered, or maybe simply just distinguished by being separate lines on the page. All bibliographies are a list, but not all bibliographies are annotated bibliographies. So an annotated bibliography will be, as I said, a bibliography with notes attached, which is what you are doing. But don't make the mistake of assuming that all bibliographies have to be done that way. Annotated bibliographies, for the annotations, typically use the formatting to indicate which parts are annotations and which parts are citations, so there's not really any labeling. You just use where you put things on the page. They generally have the annotation following the citation. So you've got your citation and then your annotation underneath it. That's just a convention that we often use. And if it's presented to an audience other than yourself, it should probably have a very formal feel, especially if it's as a proposal or if it's written for other researchers. If it's as a proposal, your annotations will generally be pretty full, maybe about a paragraph, and give a full summary and a discussion of how it's going to be used in the project. If it is a tool for other researchers or an internal tool, then you may have more bullet pointish annotations. So that bibliography I mentioned that I maintain on game studies, there's only 1 or 2 sentences of annotation for each source, because I can't say how the thing will be used, and I don't want to give too much information because I don't know which information is going to be the important part. So I give a very brief overview of what the thing is and what it's discussing. So if you're doing one that is just for you, you can just bullet point things and make it look as much like notes as you want, as long as you can read it. So when I do one that's just for me, I use colors, whimsical fonts, section headers, all kinds of stuff to make it super searchable and super easy for me at a glance to see what I'm looking at. But I would never do that for a bibliography that's intended for someone else. Instead, I would use things like tags on each entry To make it searchable, I would use a very consistent formal formatting that I know will be able to be read on any document or easily copied or something like that. That's why we generally use black and white and standard fonts. So think carefully about what's the function of your bibliography. Um, so some of the values expressed by the bibliography genre, they demonstrate a focus on existing research. They demonstrate a focus on citation and giving credit, which is something that's highly valued in Western research. In a way, they're kind of a humble act because they allow other people to do the speaking or they serve other scholars. Bibliographies focus on organization and readability because they aren't always read in linear order. They're read more like an encyclopedia or a dictionary, so they're kind of random access. And like the abstract, they value brevity and precision. And many actually begin with an abstract. And in your case, you'll put a revised version of your abstract at the beginning of your bibliography so that we know what the focus of your bibliography is. So remember that consistency is your friend. And if you get into the habit of using bibliographies now as part of your research process, you'll be in good note-taking form, and good note-taking prevents plagiarisms, helps you complete your work on schedule, and helps you return to the work easily if you need to do so, if you need to make revisions, or if you need to use that information somewhere else. So start working now on practicing bibliographies as just a standard part of your research process.